It's great to be in person with people, seeing real human beings again, and off the dreaded screens, no offence. Somebody much more famous than me said we live in extraordinary times. They're times of great anxiety. We've the egregious actions of Russia in Ukraine, and we've dreadful uncertainty. But I'll put it to everybody in this audience, the one thing I think you were certain about when you woke up this morning was you had your electricity. You knew your light would go on. You knew you could turn on your kettle, you could turn on your grill if you were going to have an Irish breakfast or whatever else. And it's something we as a nation, going back to rural electrification, can be incredibly proud of, because we've given electricity to every home in the country, and critically and equally importantly, it's a critical part of the proposition the IDA offer to the ICTs, the farmers, etc. Ireland has stable, secure and increasingly green electricity. The bad news is that on a global stage, the amount of electricity has really been predicated on fossil fuels and a high carbon intensity. And if you look at carbon in the world, there's a fabulous graph which I didn't exhibit today because I was told you can only have 3 slides, but for 800,000 years, the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was 280 parts per million. It's a McKinsey slide, which I've stolen a few times and exhibited. It's currently over 400. It's about 412, 420 parts per million, and it's just literally going through the roof. And I suppose despite the positivity coming out of COP26, which I had the great privilege and pleasure to be at in November in Glasgow, they ducked the issue of 1.5. 1.5 is dead, and somebody should have had the decency and the honesty to say that. And we're now chasing maybe an alternative target. So we have a really big problem on our hands. We in EirGrid find ourselves at the centre of the revolution that's happening in electricity, because we want that security, you want that security, industry wants that security, but we want it to be green. On a really positive front, despite COVID and despite everything else that has gone on, our country, which I'm really proud of, has passed world-leading legislation through the Climate Action Low Carbon Development Bill last year, which sets our ambition to reduce our emissions by 50% by 2030. That is, right up there with the best countries in the world. The Climate Action Plan, which is increasingly going about setting sectoral targets, has asked electricity, our sector, and many of you here are from the sector, to carry the burden of increasing the level of renewables in the power system from currently 40% to 80% by 2030. Again, nobody else in the world has set ambitions on that level. And I'm proud of that, and I think it sets, for those who criticise government, criticise policymakers, we shouldn't, because they've set the scene, they've set the tone for what it is we have to achieve. And thirdly, what they did last year is they really beefed up the Climate Change Advisory Council under the excellent and phenomenal leadership of Mary Donnelly, who I know is going to be here later today. And they've given the the Advisory Council the job of setting sectoral carbon budgets and holding government and industry and all of us to account. So despite all the uncertainty, despite all the noise and all the difficulty we have to live with, we can be proud of a government that has really put in place a policy and a legislative framework to allow us, as leaders of business, of government, etc., to get on and start delivering on behalf of the country. EirGrid in 2019 launched our strategy. Seems like 100 years ago, folks, 2019. And our fundamental purpose at the epicenter of the electricity revolution is to transform the power system for future generations. That's our purpose. Transform, because this is a revolution, not an evolution. And let's be frank about this. You won't do this incrementally. You've got to make very, very big steps. The power system, because it's no longer about the grid. 5 years ago, if somebody was standing here on behalf of EirGrid, we'd be talking about the grid. The grid is just one component of a very sophisticated ecosystem involving a multitude of players. And future generations, we all know, I'm a grandfather of 2 wonderful grandsons, 5 and 3. The legacy, what we do or don't do in the next decade, will dictate ultimately the environment in which those the next generation live. You could describe our strategy in 6 very simple deliverables. Number 1, connect 10,000 megawatts of renewable energy. Ireland currently is about 5,000 on the system, so we have to do 10,000 megawatts in the next decade, which is twice what we did in the last 15 years. We've got to upgrade the grid, and we've got huge programs in play, 2 billion worth of investment to upgrade the electricity grid to carry that energy. We've got to increase interconnectivity between Ireland, mainland Europe, and indeed the UK. We're supporters of the Green Link Interconnector, which is a private investment project which is about to go on site. And recently, and with great delight, we got planning permission for the EirGrid-sponsored connection to France, which we hope to start construction early next year. We have to develop sophisticated systems which allow the power system to operate at close to 100% renewables. We are delighted and very, very proud to have announced a number of weeks back that the Irish system can now handle up to 75% renewables on the power system. There's no other country in the world is capable of doing that, and it's a credit to the engineers in EirGrid and indeed people in the ecosystem who've delivered solutions around that. The problem is that's got to be close to 95% if we're to really realise the ambition for 2030. The market is not fit for purpose. We are leading, or certainly from a thought leadership perspective, trying to encourage government and trying to encourage regulators to deal with the market, inertia that's in the market at the moment. Because if investors don't have confidence that they can make a return on their investment, they're not going to invest. And 2030 is about getting to technology, and it's all proven technology. This is not about new inventions. The technology is there. What we've got to do is ensure private and public capital has the right incentives so they can make the investments and can deliver the projects between now and 2030. And the last part of our strategy is we want to be an exemplar company. We want to walk the talk in terms of how we operate, how we travel, etc. We want to be a low carbon company in our own right. So that was 2019. That was the journey we started. What has changed in 2022? In some respects, everything and nothing. We've had COVID-19, which has been an incredibly challenge for us as an organisation. For me personally, trying to lead an organisation living in County Wicklow, and I've got 700 people on the payroll, and I can't go into the office and I can't meet people. So that's been very, very challenging. We've had issues in the electricity system where new capacity hasn't come online. CRM stands for the Capacity Remuneration Mechanism, and new projects have not been delivered for various reasons, and that is causing us some difficulties. We were, with great privilege and delight, given the offshore mandate in May of last year. So our job now is not just to plan the onshore assets, but also to plan the offshore opportunity for Ireland into the future, but also we will be owning those assets. Our strategy in 2019 was predicated on 70% renewables on the power system, and Minister Ryan gave me a call sometime around August of last year and says, Mark, we want to increase the target to 80%. So that was, I think I described to the Business Post as a pleasant surprise. It is incredibly challenging, and there's no question about that, because the pathway from 70 to 80, every extra increment becomes much more complex technically, and also economically it becomes quite difficult. We have a security supply crisis, hands up, honestly. Yes, we've had challenges. We've had more alerts on the power system in the last year than we've had in the last 10 years. So there is a tightness in the system that we're dealing with. We've had Ukraine, we've had horrendous increase in price of electricity. And of course, the IPC report says things are getting worse. But the fundamental strategy remains exactly the same, which is to get more renewables onto the power system, reduce our dependency on fossil fuels, and drive out the vision from 2019 and now the updated vision from Minister Ryan in terms of the Climate Action Plan 2022. So everything's changed, but nothing's changed. The job still has to be done. Challenges in front of us. Delivering infrastructure, and I think everybody in this room who has any connection with the infrastructure proposition in Ireland will probably have that as number one. But we've changed our model. We've changed our community engagement proposition. We've started much more to listen to communities. We made 3 decisions in the last year amounting to hundreds of millions of capital investment that we would not have made 5 years ago. And why did we make those decisions? Because we heard what people said on the ground. What's the prize? The prize is those projects are getting through planning. We don't expect judicial review. We'll get them on the ground earlier. And we've proven, I suppose, the thesis. Go in early. Don't go in with a prescribed solution. Listen and respect what communities want, and then give them something back equally, not just a voice in the solution, but give them back in terms of an investment in their community, in terms of an offering. Offshore consents, I think the offshore vision for Ireland for 2030 is very sound, and it is up to 5 gigawatts of offshore wind in the Irish Sea between Dundalk and Wexford. Those projects are going to test new planning legislation. I see, and I was delighted to see last week that SSE have already lodged their planning application for the Arklow project. So let's wait and see, but let's be quietly confident as the conversation, around climate action improves, and today is part of that conversation, that those projects will get through the system. The pathway from 70 to 80% could be quite challenging. We're doing the work on it now, and we've promised the Minister we will report back later this year. I think we will find a pathway. I think the challenge will be not physics or engineering. It could very well be, well, at what price do you get every additional increment? Security of supply is a problem. It's going to be a problem for the next number of years. We're dealing with it. You will have read, maybe recently, we're purchasing emergency generation, which is, it's like an insurance policy. It's to have the necessary plant on the system when it gets tight, that the lights aren't going to go out. We don't lose investor confidence from FDI companies, etc. So we have that in plan. The market, being very honest, as I tend to be, I believe we've an issue with the regulatory environment in Ireland. The regulatory model, I think, was designed for a particular purpose, which was around competition, and that's very laudable, and driving down prices, etc. Is it designed for transformation, which is radically bringing a power system from currently on average 40% renewables to 80%? I don't believe so. Is it moving quickly enough? I don't believe so. Is it thinking innovatively? I don't believe so. So that is one of our biggest challenges. And I think the last and incredibly exciting proposition, which we will break cover on later this year, is we have a very clear plan for offshore in the Irish Sea. It's a number of projects, single radial connections into various points along the east coast of Ireland. What do we do with this incredible abundance of resource we have from Donegal to Cork, right across the Atlantic? Our sea area is 10 times our land area. We have an asset of extraordinary potential value to the Irish people, to the Irish nation, to the Irish economy. So we hope to start a piece of work later this year, under the Minister's office, which is to start engaging with leaders and indeed communities, etc. How does Ireland exploit this potential? And this is not about a 10-year project. This is about a 50-year project. This is about a vision for Ireland's deployment of a natural resource for the rest of this century. So that's going to be incredibly exciting. The conversations are going to be really interesting, because we have an extraordinary opportunity as a nation. And we're very proud that we've got the opportunity under the Minister's office to lead out on that, to engage, and I think to leave a legacy, I think, for the next generation in terms of an asset, a resource that can add enormous value to the economy, to society, and benefit our country. I was so glad Margaret started on the theme of leadership. I was so glad Mark spoke about leadership, because it's my ultimate passion and I suppose real belief that the irony is the climate change challenge, and I think Tom mentioned it as well, it's not about technology. The technology is substantially there. It's not about capital. There is more money in the world than there are projects. Money is chasing projects because there aren't enough projects. The issue is leadership. And leadership, people aren't born to be leaders. Leadership is not about, I was given this, I was born with this great gift. Greta Thunberg is just a teenager. Look at the impact she has had. She's an ordinary, in fact, challenged young lady, still in her teens, and look at the impact she's had on leaders. David Attenborough is 96 years of age. He was told he didn't have the face for television. He's the best communicator on the planet, still at 96, about the environment, about habitats, about diversity, etc. My greatest hero, Mandela, was an ordinary person who did most of his impact from a jail cell in Robben Island. And this gentleman who's new to us all, Mr. Zelensky, who I never heard of in my life, and a former comedian and an actor. And I loved the line when he was asked by the Americans who offered him safe passage to the United States to get out of the country and save his skin as such. He says, "I don't need a ride, I need arms." So, we're all leaders in our own way. We can all have an impact. The issue is the choices we make every day in how we engage, how we lead our people, how we have conversations in communities about maybe a new project that's going on in the community, and our perspective on whether it's good or bad or otherwise. We all have that potential within us. And it is just wonderful to be back talking about leadership, because you can't leave it to government, and it's wrong to leave it to government. We all have a role to play in it. So thank you very much, and it's a wonderful pleasure to be here and to be back in the real world. Thank you.